we understand the lost 10 tribes are to be found amongst Western nations. Lost 10 tribes are to be found amongst Western nations. That is the nations of Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England. All those areas are where the lost 10 tribes went to, and their offshoots overseas in Australia and New Zealand and also elsewhere. So that is where the lost 10 tribes are, and they are the peoples we identify as descended from Israel, to whom many of the biblical prophecies were applied, are applicable. And Abraham had been promised, he had been promised that he would become a great and mighty nation, and all the peoples of the earth would be blessed in his seed, and his descendants would do justice and judgment. Also that they would be extremely numerous, and that they would rule over all pieces, most places of the earth, and that they would possess the strategic thoroughfares and wayfares of the world, and that they would be prosperous, and other prophecies. And these prophecies, these were fulfilled. They were fulfilled in the Western nations. Western nations were fulfilled within them. And the prophecies had spoken of this. Now we had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were the forefathers. Abraham was the first Hebrew. Isaac was his son. Then came Jacob, who was also the son of Isaac. And that is how the prophecies, the blessing is devolved. First they came to Abraham. Abraham passed them on to Isaac, and Isaac on to Jacob, and Jacob on to his 12 sons. Jacob was renamed Israel, and from Israel came 12 sons. These sons were the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. Now we had, as we said, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaac was the son of Abraham. Isaac begat 2 twins, Esau and Jacob. See Genesis 25:4. Esau technically was the older, and Jacob came out after him. But Rebekah, the mother, the wife of Isaac, the mother of the twins, she had been told that the elder would serve the younger. Therefore, the elder, that is Esau, would eventually serve Jacob, the younger. Esau was technically the first one to be born. See Genesis 25:3. Later, Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. See 25:33. And Jacob received the blessing of the firstborn from his father by subterfuge, by pretending to be Esau. But Jacob received it, and it was confirmed by Isaac. And Isaac realized that this was the will of God, that Jacob should receive the blessing instead of Esau. So Jacob in this blessing was promised a healthy climate, agricultural plenty, mineral riches. Mineral riches, see Genesis 27:27. Jacob was promised a healthy climate, agricultural plenty, mineral riches, that he would be the master of his brethren, that is of Esau and Ishmael. Incidentally, according to tradition, according to also how we understand it, Ishmael became the forefather of the Arab nations, both physically and culturally and psychologically. He became the forefather of the Ishmaelites, of the forces of Islam. And Esau was the forefather of many of the peoples of Europe, and also the great powers of the world, including Russia, possibly China and Japan as well. Not that they all descend from Esau, but ruling elements amongst them were. And they had an influence on their formation, a formational influence on how they would develop. So in a spiritual sense, they too belong to the forces of Esau. The world is divided between the forces of Ishmael and of Esau, according to famous rabbis such as Ibn Gaon and others. And you can divide the whole of the non-Israelite nations into 2 portions, Ishmael and Esau. There were a third portion, they were the descendants of Israel from the 10 tribes, so the 10 tribes themselves, in some sense, were subject to Esau in an interim that is a temporary intermediate period of time that we are still into in some place, in some senses. At all events, Jacob was blessed that he should be the master of his brethren, that is of Esau and Ishmael, and that he would rule over nations, see Genesis 27:29. And Isaac confirmed these blessings twice over, and again these same blessings, or almost the same blessings, were repeated in the blessing to Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel. Israel had 12 sons, and the 12 sons of Jacob became the 12 tribes of Israel. But Jacob, and each one of the tribes had its own individuality, its own uniqueness. But in some sense, Joseph was the firstborn. He received the right of the firstborn. See 1 Chronicles chapter 5 at the end. He mentions that, and it's also mentioned elsewhere. Joseph, in effect, became the firstborn son of Israel. He inherited this from his father Jacob. And this is the blessing to Joseph. When you look at it closely, it reflects very much the blessing that Jacob had received from Isaac when Jacob pretended to be Esau. So this too is symbolic, since Joseph was to go down to the level of the nations, to become like the nations, and to evolve upward and to receive the blessings. And he did it as if he had disguised himself. He had disguised himself. He didn't know who he was. They didn't know he descended from Israelites. They forgot their ancestry. They became like the Gentiles. But nevertheless, there were aspects of the blessings that they had to fulfill, that had to be fulfilled in them. And they looked and felt like the Gentiles. Therefore, that is similar to how Jacob received the blessing from his father Isaac by disguising himself as Esau. So too Joseph was to be disguised as if by divine providence as something else, or something other than what he was, and he was not to realize who he was. So that is a point of interest. We see that Jacob, that is Israel, Jacob was renamed Israel. Jacob was renamed Israel, and he was to receive the blessings to Abraham and to inherit the land, 28:4, Genesis 28:4, 35:12. His seed was to spread all over the earth. Jacob married Leah and Rachel, the two sisters. Jacob married both of them, Leah and Rachel. This was before the giving of the Torah, before the Torah was given. According to the Torah, you're not forbidden to marry two sisters. Unless one of the sisters dies. That is, you cannot marry two sisters in the life of either one. If you marry a sister and God forbid that the sister dies, then the other sister, you can marry the other sister. But Jacob did the opposite. He married two sisters in the same week, almost on the same day. So you read the text, and he got there, and he had 12 sons from these two sisters and from their handmaidens. Altogether, they had 4 wives. And their 4 wives gave him 12 sons, and these 12 sons became the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. And Jacob was told that he would receive the blessings of Abraham and to inherit the land. And his firstborn son was Reuben. See Genesis 29:32. Then came Simeon. Then came Levi. All these were sons of Leah, his first son, his wife. And then Judah, also from Leah. After that, Rachel, the sister of Leah, gave her handmaiden Bilhah to Jacob to bear children from her. And Jacob from Bilhah begat Dan and Naphtali. Following that, Leah did the same. She gave her handmaiden Zilpah to Jacob. And Zilpah was the mother of Gad and of Asher. Reuben, the firstborn son, had grown up quite a little bit, somewhat at this time. He went out in the field and he found mandrakes. Mandrakes have a root, a dark root, and they're supposed to have valuable properties. They're good for fertility reasons, according to folklore. And all a lot of when Reuben found them, they were valued, and he brought them home to his mother Leah. And Rachel saw Leah with his mandrakes, and she asked to receive them. And Leah said that you can have them if your turn or turn to be with our husband has now come to you. You give it to me. So Leah did that. She hired for these mandrakes attention to her husband. She bore Issachar. The name Issachar means Issachar, reward. Because she was rewarded for giving up something of her own in order to bear another son to her husband. And after that, Leah bore Zebulun. And following this, Rachel gave birth to your Joseph. Joseph was the one who will overcome Edom, Esau. Says the seed of Esau does not fall, will not be defeated by the hands of Joseph. Esau represents European nations, as we said. Can also represent Germany, according to tradition. See Talmud Megillah 6. Non-Israelite Europe in general. And only Britain and the USA have proven that they are able to defeat the forces of Esau, and in the future that is what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Jacob had to leave where he was. All this was happening in Haran, in northern Syria, a place called Haran, in that region. And Jacob at that time was living with his father Laban, whose name incidentally means white, indicating that he was of fair complexion, Laban. Jacob at this time was quite successful. In addition to working for Laban, he also had his own flocks, and his own flocks were increasing. And Laban was jealous of him, and so were the other sons of Laban. So Jacob decided it was time to leave. So he set off on the way back to Canaan. And on the way he met up with an angel. See 32:24, and the angel wrestled with him. And Jacob defeated the angel. The angel gave him the name Israel. He said, your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with men and with angels, and you have overcome. And that is in Genesis 32:28. And again in Genesis 35:10, this is repeated with some changes, but the name Israel was confirmed to him. And Jacob was promised that a nation and a company of nations and kings would come from him. Benjamin was born after that. Rachel, Jacob begat Benjamin from his wife Rachel, who died in childbirth. The name Benjamin means my right hand. This may have significance because the Norman kings of England, once they ruled over England, probably descended from Benjamin. And their motto, one of their mottos was God and my right hand, reflecting the name Benjamin. Now we have in Genesis 35:22, this is the sons of this tribes. It says, now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Reuben, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, were Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Paddan Aram, and we identify these sons with different peoples, different tribes. We find that eventually these 12 tribes became nations, became great, powerful peoples in their own right. They conquered the land of Canaan and the surrounding area. They conquered it. They divided it up between them. And then you had King Saul, and then you had King David and King Solomon. David established the capital in Jerusalem, the center of Israel. Solomon, his son, built the temple in Jerusalem. In the time of the son of Solomon, Rehoboam, the 10 of the tribes were dissatisfied with the rulership, dissatisfied with how things were going. So they separated, they seceded, they set up their own kingdom in the north, known as the House of Israel, sometimes referred to in the Bible as Samaria after the capital, or the other names, sometimes as Joseph, as Ephraim, after the leading tribes. At all events, these 10 tribes were in the north, as well as they had one section of them was actually in the south, Simeon, but most of them were in the north. The Assyrians came down and conquered all of the 10 tribes and took them all into exile, and they were taken away to different areas of the Assyrian Empire. Some of them were taken across the sea and used to colonize places in Spain, places in the British Isles, places in Scandinavia. Most of them were taken by foot to the north, to the region of Caucasus Mountains, but from there they eventually migrated, they moved to the north and the west, and they converged together in northern and western Europe. From there, different nations developed. Now, these nations are descended from the 10 tribes. Now, we're not saying that everyone in these nations is descended from the 10 tribes of Israel, but we're saying that that is where the 10 tribes are. That is where the 10 tribes are in those nations. Whether this means that everyone there, or majority of the people there, are descended from Israelites or not, we don't know. It could be. At all events, that is where they are and have a dominating influence, and then we'll return from there. We identify the tribes in their places of exile. Reuben, we identify with people who settled mainly in France. Reuben, the firstborn. Reuben, the one with the romantic inclinations. Reuben with the power and the glory and excellency and the appreciation for setting matters and for titles and endowments and so on. That is Reuben. After Reuben, we had Simeon. Simeon was to be scattered amongst other tribes. So we found elements from Simeon both amongst the Jews and also amongst the 10 tribes. And we find them scattered the different elements, different enclaves amongst all the peoples who are identified as belong to the 10 tribes. Simeon, but here and there we find known entities who we can identify with the 10 tribes. One of them are the Lombards, Helobards in northern Italy, were famous as moneylenders in the Middle Ages. It's in the area of Milan. Also in Brittany, in France, we find peoples with names named after Simeon, or names after the son of Simeon. Also in Wales and in Ireland and in other areas. So Simeon was scattered, and it had been prophesied that Simeon would be scattered, as was Levi. Levi, however, tended to congregate. He returned. What happened is that Levi includes the people, Levites, ordinary Levites, mainstream Levites, and the Cohens. The Cohens, that it means a priest. A priest in Hebrew, the name of a Cohen is called a priest. Another name for the priest is a Cohen. They have names amongst the Jews. Names. Yeah. They're going to have names amongst the Jews so that people identify with Cohens, people descend from Cohens. So one of these names is Katz. Katz, yeah. Katz is short for Cohen Zedek, righteous Cohen, Katz. So I heard from Rabbi Abraham Feld. He asked me a puzzle. He asked me, what has four legs and runs after cats? Yeah, you got that? The question, what has 4 legs and runs after cats? The answer was, this is Cats and a lawyer. Anyway, you didn't get that? Anyway, doesn't matter. Another day, come another day. At all events, we had the 12 tribes of Israel. And Simeon, Levi became the Levites, who became mainly amongst the Jews because the Levites, most of the Levites after the tribes was divided, the Levites remained faithful to the law of God. And when Jeroboam, the king of the northern tribes, began to introduce pagan practices, they left the northern tribe, the northern areas, and they came to the south. So most of the Levites congregated in the area of Judah. And therefore you still find many Levites amongst the Jews today, and Cohens. Cohens and Levites are the same, they're both from the tribe of Levi. You have Judah. Judah is to be found amongst all the tribes, including amongst the 10 tribes we have enclaves, minority representatives of Judah, but mainly amongst the Jewish people. The Jewish people are named after Judah. And we have Issachar. Issachar we identify with the peoples of Finland, tentatively identify them peoples of Finland, of Switzerland. We have Zebulun, who we identify as people of the Netherlands. We have Benjamin. We find Benjamin amongst all of the tribes, and especially in the British Isles and the offshoots of the British Isles. Joseph was divided into 2 tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. The 2 sons of Joseph were Ephraim and Manasseh. And these gave rise to different peoples who, in the British Isles, and from the British Isles they went out and they colonized North America, Canada, USA, Australia, New Zealand, and some other places. And we find a predominance of namesakes from these tribes, different namesakes, some of which may be identified as from Ephraim, others from Manasseh. We find a predominance of those identifiable as coming from Manasseh to have gone to the USA. For this and other reasons, you identify the USA as Manasseh. The very name America means Ha-Machiri, is derived from Ha-Machiri. Etymology of that name historically comes from Amerigo Vespucci, who was named after Ha-Machiri, a Latinized version of the expression Ha-Machiri, meaning the sons of Machir, which was a nickname given to people otherwise known as Machir. So America indirectly received its name. America means sons of Machir. Also, the very name Machir means capitalism, the principle of money. Machir, price, in Hebrew. It has other meanings as well, but that is one of the meanings. Also, the very name Manasseh means responsible representation in Hebrew, according to Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who was lived in the 1800s, and he wasn't writing on our behalf. He wasn't writing according to what we were teaching. I don't think he knew about it. He may have, but he never expressed himself in that direction. But nevertheless, he explained the name Manasseh to mean responsible representation. And America is one of the things that distinguishes American culture, American political and national worldview, responsible representation, the values of America. So this is worth noting. This is interesting. And we had Benjamin. Benjamin we find amongst the Jewish people. Benjamin remained amongst the Jewish people, Benjamin. We also find offshoots amongst the 10 tribes, also from Benjamin. And but Benjamin is mainly amongst the Jews. And then we had the son Rachel. Rachel is a maid of Bilhah who gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Then we find amongst the Irish and also amongst the people of Denmark. And if you look at the map of the biblical of the tribes and the biblical atlas, you'll see that Dan had 2 portions. One portion of Dan was down in the southwest, on the coast. On the coast from the area of Tel Aviv inwards. Another portion of Dan was in the north, in the northern Galilee. Actually, there were other offshoots in Dan and other areas, but they were the 2 main sections. So too, we find in the map of Europe a similar configuration that applies not only for Dan, but it applies for all the tribes. So we find Dan amongst the Irish and also in Denmark. And amongst the Irish, we find other tribes, also elements from Naphtali and others. From Asher, from the tribe of Asher as well. Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joshua that became full-fledged tribes in their own right. See in 48:5-6. It was said that Ephraim and Manasseh would become a multitude in the midst of the earth, and that they would rule over the earth. and the other nations would be dependent upon them and built up from them. And that the name of their fathers, Abraham and Isaac, would be called upon them. See Genesis 48:16. The name of their fathers, Abraham and Isaac, would be called upon them. So this means literally that the essence of the forefathers, that the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, would be expressed through the sons of Joseph. That is what it means. So the simple meaning, that is what it's saying. But in addition, there's a secondary meaning that the very names of these people would recall Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we find this. Abraham was known as the Hebrew. Abraham the Hebrew, it says, Genesis 14:13. The early inhabitants of Britain called themselves Iberi or Iberi. That is another way of saying the word Hebrews. The Celtic peoples, the early inhabitants of the British Isles, and also Western Europe, they're known as Celts after what the Romans called them. But they didn't call themselves that. They called themselves Iberi or Iberi. That was the name they had. That was their own name that they applied to themselves. And even in folklore, now this name is still used. We say Hibernian means someone from Ireland. We still use this expression. And then this word Iberi is a European Western way of saying the word Ibri or Hebrew. And also names given to the Anglo-Saxons and to the Scythians who settled England and the settled portions of Western Europe, and that derived from the name Isaac. So too the name Jacob. Jacob is recorded in the Union Jack. Jack is another form of Jacob. Britain is called the Union Jack. The Union Jack, the flag of Britain, the Union Jack. Meaning the uniting of Jacob. We even have a verse on this thing, Isaiah 49:6. Too small a thing they should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob, to restore the protected ones of Israel. I will also make you a light to the nations so that my salvation will reach to the ends of the earth. And so too, we have the nickname Yankee. Yankee is similar to a Hebrew pronunciation of the word Yaakov. Yaakov could be pronounced as Yanko. According to medieval Sephardic pronunciations in Europe, and even now we also find it in Yiddish. Someone called Yaakov is nicknamed Yankee, or Yanko, coming from Jacob. The word Yank, in other words, is a shortened form of the word Jacob. And so they were nicknamed after them, after Jacob, fulfilling the prophecy.
Just a comment. Now that you've said that, growing up in the United States, I'll never think of the word Yankee again. That's an interesting perspective there, sir. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. There's more where that came from. The Bible is